author of I Live to Tell the Story, Love, Legacy, and Resilience. Now, Tamika, this is it feels like a departure, as you said, from your other writings and where you were talking much more about the movement and allyship. And so what was it that caused you in this moment to take a more personal route when it comes to the story you wanted to tell?
Well, you mentioned the Women's March, which I always, have to put my head down for a moment when I think about the Women's March. Keep from saying the wrong thing.
Listen, it's serious, so feel free to cuss.
No, but it's a beautiful effort that no one can ever take away from us. It's history that we made. 6 million people around the world coming together, and not everyone agreed on everything, but one thing we did agree on was that we needed one another in that moment. And we worked really hard to make that day happen. And not just that day, because there were at least 2 more marches, not to mention we had over 600 women, largely white women, to get arrested for family separation, which is something they had never, ever been involved in. You never had that type of gathering of folks. We had, people supporting Shakisha Clemens, which was a young black woman who was derobed in a Waffle House in Alabama after they tried to make her pay for a plastic fork.
I remember that.
Yeah, you remember that? Terrible situation. My dear sister, I love Shakisha so much. She's doing so well. And there were other cases, also gun violence. We were really kind of the first ones to start bringing other races out around the idea of gun violence prevention and intervention. And then immediately following that, you had all of the young people that got together and had, however many millions to gather.
Which is kind of crazy considering that gun violence is so ubiquitous. It's certainly not just an urban issue. This is something that we have seen in schools all across the country in ways that it almost seems surprising that was the catalyst for bringing out multiple races.
Well, let's just be clear. I had many white women who said, why are we doing this? It was actually a big fight within the march and within the organization, very contentious. And people, there are a lot of women who were saying that we were taking them in a different direction that they didn't understand nor appreciate. They didn't feel it was something that they should be involved in. And then school shootings just got crazier and crazier and crazier. And people were like, oh wait, that, we want to do that now.
This is what those smart black ladies were talking about.
Now we want to do it. And we said, well, let's get in front of it by pushing our elected officials to do something about it even before it got to be such a significant issue as it is today. So a lot of great work that we did. Nonetheless, you all know, you watched it play out. It was very painful. There was a lot of hurt, a lot of harm, and just a lot in general that went on. To be
clear, this was the Women's March that took place at the beginning of the first Trump administration.
Well, I'm telling you, it went on for 3.
Right. It started at the beginning and then continued.
Yeah, again, every part of this conversation, we could break it down and just do one show on that, because the Women's March is a study in and of itself. It was 3 years of beautiful hell, and at the end, when we decided that it was time for us to leave, it was the best thing for us emotionally, physically. There are other women there now. I'm sure they're, doing their thing. And it was the best decision to make. But once we left, it was like, oh my God, like I'm not myself mentally, physically. I was addicted to pain pills at the time, taking prescription pills and didn't realize at first when I started taking them, it was about getting some rest because I couldn't sleep. It was so much going on. I mean, you have to imagine that you are probably one of the most high profile organizers in the nation, maybe in the world at the time, because everybody was watching what the women will do to respond to Donald Trump. It wasn't that they just liked Tamika Mallory. It just, I was just sitting in a role that garnered a lot of attention. And we're working on projects that are not just high intensity, but they're also very dangerous.
Very.
We're literally putting our lives on the line out there, going up against white supremacists and others on a regular basis. And so that it wasn't just the stress of the politics of the march. It was also the stress of the job, just the stress of what we chose to take on.
Yeah.
And so by the time it was over, it's kind of like running a marathon. You get home, you got bruises, your legs you need to wrap stuff, your knees, your back, your arm, you need a heating pad. And I needed all of that from on the inside, you know. And so that's so the reason why I wrote the book is because a lot of, you know, going to rehab and having to figure out how to get my life back together from that time period, you know, I thought for a while that I would just keep the story to myself. You know, people who knew.
Right.
Who needed to know, they were aware.
Right.
Other than that, didn't think, you know, it needed to be talked about. And then one day it just occurred to me that it wasn't my story to hold. It was like God's story to tell, because that's what we're supposed to do, right? Like we're supposed to praise him with our mouths and with our everything. Right. And I knew I needed to say to somebody who's sitting in Virginia or, you know, North Dakota somewhere, God, you know, you never know, right? Because in fact, we had people march in North Dakota.
Wow.
Like we had 2 people who were actually in space or something. Like they were on some type of whatever you call it.
Not the current astronauts that are still up there.
But they were like they were somewhere far out in the universe.
Right.
And they took a picture of them being like, you know, we're in solidarity. It was that expansive. And so I know that somebody is there still hustling, trying to keep the movement going.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You got judgment. You got people who won't work with you. You can't get the resources that you need. You think people are going to be for the thing. Like, we're for the thing. This is what we say. And they're not. And the folks that you really believe should be an ally or should be a supporter, they actually are working in the opposite direction. And along the way, you lose family, you lose friends. You might lose your own husband or wife because people don't agree that maybe you shouldn't be so outspoken.
Right.
And the problem with being a person who's really about what you say is that once it gets in you, then your eyes start opening to things and you can't close the door.
You cannot see what you've already unsee what you've already seen.
You can't unsee it. You're like, why I gotta know? I don't want to know. I tell people all the time, don't tell me that this brand did this to you or that thing happened or, you know, whatever, because I'm finished with the brand. Like, I'm not one of those people who has a hard time. It's a few things. Lululemon, I had to kind of give them up a little bit. I have a lot of stuff from them, but I had to give them up because I kept seeing videos of Black women telling stories about this happened and they arrested me and I'm being, profiled in the store. And I'm like, oh God, you know, like, don't tell me, because I'm one of those people. Once I hear it, then I'm in it. And then I have to at least, even if I don't start a movement around it, the little internal me is like, I'm just not doing that. Meanwhile, Lululemon was my spot, like, to walk around. So then it causes a lot of mental stress because you're trying to do the right thing. And it feels like the requirement on you is just so much.
Because the more you are paying attention to what's happening, the more decisions you are compelled to make to make sure that this is what we say every day, make sure your purpose is in alignment with the needs of the people.
Exactly.
And walking it with your back straight.
And that's a lot to stay true to that.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm one of the 92%. And there are some things that you experienced in the Women's March that I think are instructive for those of us who are either still resting or are adjusting the rest to do what's necessary for the people. Talk to us about one of the major lessons that you learned in your experiences when it comes to organizing with white women in particular, who have a vested interest in destabilizing this system, but who also have a vested interest in perpetuating it to the extent that they don't believe it can be destabilized, and they will always be at least in the number 2 position, right up underneath white men. What are we to make of that, and what lessons should we be taking from your experience to apply to this current moment?
Well, I'll just say this: the number 2 position is dropped down to about a number 8, 9, or 10 right now, because these guys want only white men. They'll let a few white women, maybe another woman of color, maybe do something.
Yeah.
But have you heard them announce that, there's 50% women in leadership? In fact, their entire mission is to dismantle what we know as diversity, equity, and inclusion that should be in place, and there should be no debate.
Right.
DEIA, accessibility. There should be no debate by any company that those words, because when you say DEI, it's so quick.
Yes.
It's just a little thing,
Yes.
and people see it as a program. But when you say diversity, equity and inclusion and accessibility, what are we talking about, Target? What do you mean, Target, that you don't want? You're rolling back and changing the name. Why? Like, this should be stand on business, 10 toes down with all the black people and women or whatever. So most people have said to us, and this is all, they use this as a way to not, support or deal with the fact that getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a problem. So I hear the people in my comments, some black folks, it only benefited white women anyway.
I hear that a lot.
Which, by the way, that's not accurate.
That is not true.
It's not accurate at all. I think from a data perspective, certainly white women have always infiltrated anything that we fought for and made it, accessible to them as much as possible. Of course, I'm sure I understand that.
It's another day ending in Y.
We get that. I know that. But if you think about the full scope of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, and you think about federal workers and all of that, right now, there are people that are being laid off, and it's about to get worse, and it is going to impact black folks.
That's right.
And they are doing it under the guise of getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion and shrinking government. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So you might not think that they're talking about you.
Right.
But they know what they're talking about. They know when they tell you that at colleges, they don't want you to focus on cultural studies, which we know that the Black Student Union, even in PWIs, predominantly white institutions, for people who don't know, that the Black Student Union is probably the most powerful group on any campus.
That's right.
The black people, they cool. Everybody wants to be like them. So when they say they don't want diversity and inclusion, they're talking about you. But again, if we're going with the data, pure data, yes, it is true that white women have benefited from DEI. Well, guess what? They don't want you either, because I see white women on TV,
boo-hoo crying,
baby, boo-hoo crying, and I feel sorry for them too. I ain't gonna tell. I know people will say why, because ignorance is dangerous.
Yes.
Ignorance is dangerous. And so, one, I think that, I believe that in this particular moment, yes, we can sit around and say, well, that's what you get. You gonna F around and find out? Well, we all gonna F around and find out together.
And I'm a petty person who likes to say I told you so, but my audience, I've said this many times, I can't even find the joy that I used to find in I told you so, because
I'm telling you,
we gonna suffer together because of your stupidity. Yeah, I told you so, but damn it, now I gotta build a contingency
I'm suffering
plan.
Exactly. Yes. Right. And so so I think now at this time, when we know that we have 2 years before we can vote in the midterms, which, by the way, I just had this conversation with some wonderful Democrats and some other individuals. Even an independent was in the conversation. We're not going to wait to do fire bill. Come on, running.
Right.
3 months out. Everybody got to get them. Where at? Right. They the polls.
We ain't doing that.
We're not doing that. Right now. One, you can run.
Yes.
How about that? How about you can run? How about Lucia McBeth? The mother of Jordan Davis, who was killed in a parking lot at a gas station because a white man said the music was too loud. That woman stood on that stage at the Women's March of 2017, looked out at all of those women and said, I think I'm going to run for office. And now she's Congresswoman Lucia McBeth, okay?
That's right.
So you run. That's one. So now get ready. And nowadays, we can't just be as expressive as we have been in the past. We might have to do kitchen fundraisers, basement fundraisers. It might have to be a quiet movement behind somebody who you're not ready to get attacked yet. You're not ready for the war yet. You're just trying to get your chest straight. So you run. Okay. But if you decide you're not, who is the person in your community? No, they're not going to be perfect.
Right.
They're not going to be perfect. You're not going to agree on everything, because there's some stuff that Lucia McBeth voted on that I was like, I don't know, like, what's that all about? We're not going to agree. But if somebody says, should I support her? I'm going to tell you, yes. Right?
Yes.
So we're not going to agree. And if you're going to have to agree on every point, your most radical points, you know, all of that, that's the elected officials, baby. That is just, don't even go there.
I keep telling people, I'll need you to have a moral conversation with your pastor.
Yes.
I need you to be in the voting booth. I need you to be, what is it that we say, folks? Cold, calculated, and ruthless in the voting booth.
Ooh.
Which of these candidates is either going to help us the most or harm us the least? That is the question.
That's it.
Not
harm
which one of them was rocking the sweet black baby Jesus back to sleep when Mary and Joseph was arguing. We don't need that one. We need the one that's going to help us the most or harm us the least.
If you're looking for the person that is on police accountability, free Palestine, whatever, you know, God knows, gun violence money, trying to help get grassroots groups gun violence money. If you're looking for all that in one person, baby, I mean, there's some, right? But look what happens to them. Right. Cori Bush is an example. Jamal Bowman is another example. They're trying to take out Summer Lee, which, you know, I hope that that all of us are able to get around her and make sure she's good. So I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying that, and I look for those candidates too. That's my first look. I do a first glance.
Yes.
I'm like,
yeah.
But there's always something. And right now, what we need is harm reduction. We got to get people out. We have to create balance. Balance. So whether it's your independent candidate, I love some of the independents. I think that we should do more of that, because I think the two-party system that we had is turning people off. Yeah. Right? You know, folks, is just, there's so many people who could have helped us win this election that did not even vote because they are turned off, and rightfully so, especially when you look at black men. The way that the Democratic Party ignores the issues, the needs of black men, black women, we can see ourselves. You open up the platform, you listen to them speak.
Well, but black women also organize to make that happen.
Absolutely. Yes. I don't disagree, and I tell black men that in my life all the time. But I also have some, and you know, it's a sweet side of me, it's sweet spot, that I have some understanding about how they have been beat down so bad and have been told to just, you know, if you're a professional, stay out the way, look straight forward, don't get into any conflict because you're too loud. You move too much, you're a danger to people. And so you have a lot of our men who won't even speak too much in a room because they don't want to be deemed as dangerous or out of control or whatever. And so I think those things have to change. You're starting to see more black men meeting around mental health, getting together around political organizing. And we have Black Men Build. You have what Charlemagne does around mental health services. So it is starting, but they've got a ways to go. And we will help them get there, because we always do, but they do have a ways to go. So I'm saying a whole lot of things, but the point is that it's an organizing time. It's an organizing time. Right. Get your stuff together, find your group, find your people. It might only be 3 people today, but if 3 people bring 2 more people, now look at you. You're growing and growing and growing. And that's the type of organizing that I'm about. It's knocking on doors. It's getting in community. And, you know, and I think that's what we need to focus on, because I don't think we can sit this out or say we're just not going. No, it's not. That's not where we at.
And that building of the meme with the black women sipping the tea on the rooftop watching the city burn, I keep saying eventually them flames gonna hit the building we sitting on, and ain't gonna be no fire department because it done been burned up. So at some point we are going to have to recognize
but it's okay for us to watch it a little bit.
I'm gonna sip a little more tea.
A little bit.
I'm gonna be like, ooh, girl, you see that building over there? That one deserved to go. I'm gonna say that one over there deserved to go.
But let's not jump on the highway and all of us are jam-packed and can't get out at the last minute. Let's make a plan. Figure out how long we going to, sit down and rest. We deserve it. We did everything right.
That's right.
It's time for us to be able to move now to a place of abundance rather than us always operating on just trying to get a little bit. So, I get that. And it's a tough conversation because, it's a lot of perspectives on it.
Right.
But it's organizing time. And then I'll just say the last thing is put your money in your pocket.
Come on.
If they don't respect you and they got the audacity to debate whether or not your diverse behind can have some equity and a little inclusion and some accessibility for a person who has decided that rather than them sitting at home, with whatever their disability. My sister Teslin Figueroa was talking about this yesterday on my podcast when she said, these people have decided that rather than them sitting at home doing nothing,
Right.
and just living off of their disability or, living in disability, they decided, I'm going to go to the Walmart
Give me a job.
I was in Target one night a long time ago, and I think it was in Atlanta, and there was a man who was deaf, who was actually moving around with a machine, helping you. You tell him he was finding stuff, and somebody else came over and they told him, and he went, I got my stuff.
Right.
And it took maybe a little extra minute, but I prefer that I would have the opportunity to support someone like him versus me just being like, I gotta go. We don't need that. I just think that we are going back to a place that is very, very dangerous, and it's going to exclude a lot of our people and cause a lot of mental health stress.